Welcome to the CPO Rising podcast series brought to you by Products That Count, the world's largest nonprofit community, engaging over 500,000 product managers and chief product officers united by a mission to empower everyone to build products that truly count. In a world flooded with products, only a few ignite passion, deliver value at scale, and transform lives. Behind those exceptional products are visionary CPOs and high-performing product teams. We recognize these trailblazers through our coveted awards, accelerate careers from PM to the C-suite and beyond through daily best practices, and serve as the trusted advisor to nearly all Fortune 1000 CPOs. Our corporate alliance includes Walmart, Ford, Cisco, Johnson & Johnson, Amplitude, and more. The most admired product leaders across industries serve on our advisory council, guiding the future of product leadership. Together, we're shaping a future where every product counts. Learn more at productsthatcount.org. Produced in partnership with Capgemini and Mighty Capital, this series brings you exclusive conversations between member of our CPO Advisory Board, Denise Hemke, and the 2025 CPO Award winners. Get ready for raw insights, real strategies, and the secrets behind their success. Let's get into it.
Hi, Yana, Welinder. It is so great to be able to connect with you today.
So good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So welcome to your CPO finalist interview with Products That Count. And you're not only a CPO, but you are a CEO too. And so I'm interested to learn. I think you've got so much to share. So I'd love to maybe start with that. Could you talk a little bit about yourself? Tell us about Kraftful, which is doing, some really incredible work, number one. And then really that journey to CPO and to really CEO.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I'm Yana. I'm founder, CEO, and CPO of Kraftful, which is an AI platform built specifically for product teams. We help product teams automatically collect and analyze lots and lots of data to get clear insights onto what to build, and then directly integrate those insights into their backlogs as user stories and also PRDs. Over the past 2 years, I've really kind of been on a journey with Kraftful, which is we've gone from 0 to 1 to now serving over 50,000 product teams at various tech companies, Fortune 500 companies, car manufacturers, global retail brands, even cities and public agencies, because they also have customers that they want to listen to. And then before Kraftful, I led product teams at several tech companies, ultimately leading teams responsible for products serving many millions of users. And that's where I sort of learned firsthand about the challenges teams face at scale, which is kind of what brought me to solving the very problem I'm solving at Kraftful.
Yeah, I love that. It's like you've experienced it. And so you are the, ideal customer profile, right? Like you're like, I'm selling to me. And so I can totally relate to all those issues.
I'm scratching my own itch.
Yeah,
That's great.
absolutely. If you can do that, that is incredible. So, maybe unpack that journey a little bit more. I mean, you've been in product leadership roles. You've, been the CPO, CEO. Like, how has the role kind of changed and morphed over the years?
Yeah, I would say that the CPO role has changed dramatically from kind of what, even sort of before I was at Kraftful. I would say that I found that my role was primarily about, product strategy. And now it's so much more central to the kind of being a player in the company growth. It's in some ways sort of hard for me to decouple that between what's happened for CPOs generally versus what happened for me when I'm both a CEO and a CPO and a founder, right? Where I have all the hats.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
I'm wearing all these hats. But I do think there is this sort of like this piece around aligning technology design and marketing and sales tightly around user insights, because there is this idea that we now in product can use AI for so many different things, and kind of be able to make rapid decisions and kind of informed decision making, bring everyone along in that journey. And it's actually sort of easier to do that. That's what I've observed, kind of just like looking around in my CPO network, looking at our customers and how they work. I would say that from where I sit, the job feels much more strategic, cross-functional, and data-driven.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure it can be hard to disambiguate all the hats, but yeah, I think your sentiment is right, and you've got obviously this unique purview of obviously working with a bunch of CPOs, which is really incredible. And I'm definitely going to ask you more on that later.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
it's been an exciting journey.
yeah, and I think what's interesting is obviously you hear a lot of talk about, CPO is a great proving ground. It's a great training ground for becoming CEO. I think because exactly what you're describing.
Mhm.
We're often that glue of how are we bringing all these cross-functional people together, and the CEO is the leader of the business, and you're doing the same thing, and you're pinch hitting in all of those roles too, when as and when you need to. So I guess what would you say are some of like the biggest benefits, maybe in the challenges of, kind of bringing both of these roles into this single role?
Yeah, I think that being able to be both makes it much easier for me to kind of see the business incredibly closely and bring that into product at every step of the way. Now, of course, what we're building is also making that very easy for the team, and so I think it's sort of like that dual effect of both my merged role in the company that I work at. I think another piece is sort of just like as any founder CEO, you have to look at where is my strength and then double down on that and then fill kind of the gaps around that. And for me, of course, kind of coming at it from products, living the problem we're solving, it's really made sense for me to be the CPO. And then I can sort of be the strategic CEO and think about the bigger company vision. But there's a lot of kind of operational aspects that I then get help with from other executive team members. Versus, if you have someone coming in and enroll being a founder CEO with a different set of strengths and and sort of a different background, it would never make sense for them to be the CPO. And to kind of have those two hats, they would probably focus on other things and bring in a CPO to really help them with product.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. Are there other things that like I love that piece of wisdom, which is like you got to surround yourself, and it's the same thing we always do, right? You look at your team and you say, "Hey, if my team is a puzzle, right? What's the missing piece that I need? Do I need somebody who's got AI skills or whatever that is?" So it's taking that thing that we've always done in talent, and you're saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, how do I surround myself with great leaders that kind of bolster the areas where I don't come from if I don't come from the sales background?" Are
Yeah.
there other, things that, somebody moving or transitioning from a CPO role to a CEO role might find surprising, might find, challenging?
Yeah. I mean, there's this general kind of sense of like, the product manager is the CEO of the product, and there's in what you discover as the CEO, and this is obviously, and then the CPO is closer to the CEO role because you kind of see what the CEO does. But once you bridge over and sort of prior to this worked closely with the CEO, so I kind of had a sense of what that is, but I didn't have the responsibility of it. And I think getting the responsibility of everything that the CEO carries is really interesting and really challenging. Let's say at both
Yeah.
times. Right? So that's something that is sort of surprising that you feel like you have had the universe of you've known the CEO universe entirely, and then when you're actually the CEO, it's different, right? When you're actually doing the fundraising, it's different as opposed to preparing all of the material for fundraising or coming in at different points in time, but actually handling it end to end is just a very different experience. And so I think that surprise element is definitely there.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure, it's like we all feel like, at least on the product side, I generally believe we carry the bag on sales numbers just as much as the sales team, right? But I'm sure you feel really differently about it, being where, hey, this is my target. I've got to hit it.
Yeah,
We're in a partnership role here in product, but now this is like you are really carrying the bag just like a member of the sales team.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, more so than they are
Yeah.
in many ways.
For sure, for sure. You've got the weight of the world and a whole organization on your shoulders. Um, well, I think I know the answer given what you do, but I'm going to have to ask you anyway. Would you describe yourself as sales centered, finance centered, product centered? And then, tell me how that really ultimately drives how you think about direction and priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guessed right, probably, which is
Mhm.
we are product centered, and we're really kind of our North Star is building a product that people genuinely love. Everything from sales to finance is then guided by user needs and product excellence. Our prioritization is simple. What features bring the most value to customers, and if we can nail that, our product growth, our sales growth, we get strong financial metrics that kind of naturally flow from that.
Nice. And maybe because you've been in product for a long time, and obviously prioritization is one of those things that different people use different methodologies as a product organization that focuses on product people. What are you doing for prioritization to assess that value?
Yeah. So we use Kraftful at most steps in the process in terms of just being able to funnel up all the data um, around what we know. So we obviously pipe in all of our data and we get to see how frequently issues come up. Now, we don't necessarily, just because something comes up frequently doesn't mean that we will act on it and prioritize that, but it gives us just raw numbers, right? We know the kind of the things we know automatically is how many times pain points came up or requests or complaints or whatever is the category, and then the deal amount associated with those requests, right? So we have those numbers we just get automatically. It's very easy at our fingertips. Now then from there we can look at things like if I start building this feature that is kind of would solve this pain point, now is this gonna bring us closer to where we need to be from a strategic perspective? And that there's a few different levers there because we're building to solve the pain points that product teams have today, knowing that the product management profession is going to evolve very, very rapidly over the next few years. And so we're trying to make sure that we're not building too deep on today's problem, and we're always thinking about what's going to be tomorrow's problem, given that it's that close in time. To give you kind of a more concrete example of what I think about,
Yeah.
for example, I think prioritization is going to be a different beast altogether for every team when when the engineering team isn't constrained by resources the way they are today and can really leverage AI in ways where you're not going to think about do we fix this bug or do we fix this bug, right? You're going to fix them all all at once.
Yeah.
And you're not necessarily going to be thinking about do we build this feature or do we build that feature where you can like release this feature to the 10% of users who needed it and hide it in the product for 90% so you're not creating a bloated product. But AI can kind of do all of that development work, the personalization in products. There's lots and lots of ways in which a PM is going to be thinking about a product
Yeah.
differently, right? And so we're thinking about that. Today, they need a certain set of tools to be able to prioritize. In the future, they're going to need a different set of tools. So even though we have all the numbers on what they're requesting and what deal sizes we can unlock with that, we're building solutions for that, but we're trying not to build too deep there and instead be anticipating so that our product really is innovative in like a year from now.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. I mean, I think what you're pointing out is just this like lightning pace at which our roles are going to fundamentally change. I personally was playing with an application recently, Bolt,
Mhm.
and you really start to think about, wow, how much the role of the PM or the designer, somebody who's interfacing with that application
Yeah.
is going to change and what it's going to look like to your point in like 3 years from now or 5 years from now. I love the way you kind of frame that. It's like, resources are not going to be this sort of precious commodity, maybe that they've always been, because we're going to have the AI for that. So that's a really interesting problem, which is how far deep do you go on today's issues versus how much do you take that visionary approach and walk that line?
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's fascinating time to be alive. I think all of these different AI coding tools are just really moving incredibly fast and are changing so many things around how we do product.
Yeah, but I think the piece that, is great in all this is like obviously this synthesis that your product is able to do, is one of these, superpowers that product managers can have to kind of govern what they do. Because even with infinite resources, you're going to have to think about how do I sequence it, who do I launch it to, all the things you just highlighted.
Absolutely, and you will always want to be listening to the people who will be using the product, even if, like, no matter how you build it for them, you will always want to listen to them
Yeah.
because we want to make sure that it solves their needs.
Yeah, and it's that, sort of discernment of this is what I'm hearing, this is what we should be working on as a result, that connective tissue, that's where I think our role is really gonna focus.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about this North Star, right, of,
Mhm.
creating value for your customers. So, kind of what does that equate to in terms of a metric that you all focus on? Or maybe there's a set of metrics?
Yeah. So we think about our North Star metric is always revenue, so MRR.
Mhm.
I think about it, it's the best representation of actual value for our customers, right? That they get from our products. There's so many different things we could measure in product, which we do too, and there's sort of like more like health metrics, but um, driving continuous improvement and sort of meaningful engagement. That's what we see from our people upgrading. Are they continuously paying? That's what we look at.
Got it. And it sounds like when you're talking about that, hey, are they upgrading? Are they continuously paying? Maybe as you talk about your business a little bit, is it primarily a product-led growth motion? Is it sales-led? Are you, doing sort of both there?
Mhm. Great question. Yeah, we're 100% product led. We have grown exclusively through organic inbound. And so people come, sign up for a free trial, use the product, and then they can upgrade to various self-serve plans. We fairly recently introduced an enterprise plan. And so now we are moving customers to enterprise plans when they reach a certain volume. But that
Yep.
is still, those customers still came inbound. They engaged with the product. They liked the product before they got to kind of be hand raisers and say, now I want to be on an enterprise plan. So definitely everything around that product is product led, which then means that our product really needs to stand on its own, right? That you're not going to get a demo and then have like lots of sales hand holding in the process. It's got to be a really compelling product from day one.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's back to the statement you made earlier that I sort of let pass, but now it means it even more, which is, we carry the bag because the product is the sales team, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I love that, and yeah, it definitely makes you emphasize and focus on things like onboarding in ways that, are easier to gloss over
Mhm.
when you're not following a product-led growth model.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's fun. It's actually one of my most favorite things about product is to figure out how do you get people instantly to that like aha moment. That's always been my favorite part in product, even before I got to product leadership. So I get to go back to my roots.
Yeah, yeah, and what a great place to do it in. And so maybe that's great to think about. Like we talked about sort of this unique situation, right? This unique spot that you're sitting in because you're selling to other CPOs, I assume. Those are the people who ultimately own the budget for the products that you're purchasing, even if they're not the one kind of getting in there doing that free trial themselves. And so I'm curious, like, how does that dual hat, you know, like what insights has that given you and how does that shape your product strategy and prioritization? And it might be back to some of that forward thinking that you were talking about.
Yeah, definitely. So I think helping other product teams succeed is a really cool place to be at because we see common pain points across different industries, and we get to think about how those pain points will evolve in the future. We then dog food our own product extensively, which then helps us know everything about our customers' needs, and just by using our product. And so we can strategically prioritize what will truly solve their problems. I think that dual perspective, both talking to them, knowing what their pain points are, and then using our own product to learn what we learn from those conversations. Because, for example, we pipe in call transcripts or support tickets into Kraftful, and then we distill the insights. And then we can kind of see, here's how they would experience the product if they try to do the same thing. And there's a lot of other interesting aspects around it where we dog food the whole process, right? So we get to think about what's the best support channel to use to be able to get product insights out of that. What's the best ticketing system to use? Now Kraftful automatically writes user stories that sync directly to Jira in Linear, and we built both of those integrations. And while building those integrations, we dog fooded both Jira and Linear to be able to kind of really dog food the process end to end. So we get to kind of really feel our customers' pain points and think about what would we like it to be in the future, given that we're also them.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of an interesting mind puzzle.
No, I love it. And I think there's no better place to be, right, when you can dog food your own product and walk a mile in the customer's shoes, because you know where all the friction points are. You feel them too.
Yeah.
And so hopefully you're running ahead of your customer, then identifying what those things are.
Yeah.
I'm curious then, like, because you're kind of going through, it almost feels like you might influence like their stack that
Yeah.
sits even outside of the product you own, because they're probably asking you, I know that I'd be asking you, hey, what are you using for this? What works better for that? And so it sounds like you have even a broader influence than the product that you've built yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And because we get to then try that stack, right? And
Yeah.
both from our own personal experience and also having heard customers, sometimes they come in and they're sort of like, we use this support channel. Do you have an integration for it? And if not, we're not too tied to it. Is there something else you would want us to use? We have our own survey product. That's usually where we get to really influence how people do surveys. You can integrate existing survey solutions to Kraftful, and we analyze that data, or you can use Kraftful's survey product. And we really changed how product teams survey their customers now because of how that works, where we automatically generate questions based on past insights, so that you can kind of go deeper and essentially just build a survey for you, so it becomes a kind of a 1 minute exercise as opposed to this really long process of figuring out what questions to ask. And we have AI generated questions at the end of the survey that are personalized to the user, so you can really gather more insights. So that's all to say, we're drastically changing how people are doing product discovery throughout the whole process, both in terms of what tooling they're using, and also just like what is their process.
Yeah, so that's it. So you touched on so many things there. So you touched on like the support channel is one thing. You can integrate with third-party surveys, but you built one yourself. The customized AI questions at the end. What are all the other listening channels that you all are tapping into?
Yeah, great question. So it is support tickets, survey data, the two we just mentioned. You can connect all of your call transcripts. So that can either be something like Google Meet or Gong, and we analyze all of those. It is any kind of social listening, so app reviews, online reviews, and things like Trustpilot or G2. It could even be things like Twitter X or Twitter or X.
Yeah.
Or Reddit data. So a lot of different types of insights that we're pulling together. And it's always fascinating to me to see our customers discover that they actually had lots of insights in a place where they didn't think about it, or it wasn't accessible to their product team previously. And now suddenly they're seeing that, and that's a wealth of information that they hadn't really considered. They're sort of like, oh, we just need to analyze our call transcripts. That's what we do, user interviews. And then they discover what's in support, or they discover that they have a ton of users talking about them on Reddit, and they haven't really been listening to that channel at all. So I've loved that part of the process too, just helping customers discover data.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds incredible, because even if they knew it, right? Even if they knew there was a source out there, it's like, is there some scalable, repeatable way that I could actually analyze that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to imagine that when you go and visit any of your customers, like, you are their superhero. It's got to be a pretty great experience, right? As a product
Exactly.
person, serving product people and kind
Yeah.
of giving them this superpower that really scales.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I think, I think back to my own kind of journey in product. I in one job prior to Kraftful, I remember I would spend my Friday nights with like a glass of wine, reading App Store reviews because I couldn't get the PMs to read them, and there was no other like way to do it. There wasn't a tool to do it, and so I just imagine, if I were to sell Kraftful to me back then, I'd be so grateful.
Yeah, I
Friday.
can totally empathize. How many times have it's like you've read win-loss data and you're actually trying to parse it all apart because it's not one thing, right? There's like 3 things in there. So you're like, "Oh, I'm manually tagging all these things." Ah, yeah. I It's saving the amount of time I can imagine that your product is saving product people is just incredible.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
So you talked about it a little bit, right? Like how our roles are evolving. So what do you think that picture looks like in the future in terms of your industry?
Mhm.
And, how do you see Kraftful's like leading the way there?
Yeah. I think that the different roles on the product team are slowly going to merge much more,
Mm.
because of this different sort of AI tooling. We make everyone a user researcher, right? So that's one example. Tools like Bolt makes everyone an engineer, right? Or like the future version of it could. Um, and so I think that we're going to have a team of product builders much more so than engineers, designers, and product managers. Now, how quickly we get to that team of product builders is sort of that's the question, right? And I think that's going to be different at different companies. Um, and I feel like our company, we're sort of like very close to that in many ways.
Mm.
And sort of like there's a lot of folks who are wearing lots of different hats, and in some extent being a startup helps, being building with AI helps. We kind of have to start using everyone else's AI the same way we use ours, just to kind of make sure we're at the top of that process. But yeah, so merged roles, I would say, is sort of like what I see most clearly in the future. And then there's this sense of, at some point with super intelligence, I do think that AI will be able to build products end to end. And
Yeah.
so for but I also think that humans love to build. It's something we're driven by. It's something we want to do. And so I think of it as sort of like, the analogy in my mind is uh, photography and art. So people are still engaging in art, even though you can take a perfect photo of something. And so I think that there's going to be products built end to end by AI, and there's going to be products kind of maybe more like artisanal products, but they will be, your artisanal SaaS or whatever.
Right.
It still will be built by humans, assisted by AI, but be sort of like more of this um, general product builder persona on those teams, building these products. But that human drive to create, I don't think that's going to go away.
No, I mean it's so much of how we get fulfillment, right? Is to be able to build. And
Yeah.
so when you picture that AI world, like you even picture in that world, I mean, I too share the view of you with you that like, you can't help but look at a product like Bolt and say, hey, that might be for ideation and early revisions of code today, but eventually,
Hmm.
with Bolt or maybe a cursor or something else in that space, you'll be able to fix these things real time. So even in this AI concept that you have, it sounds like you think even in that world, maybe there isn't this consolidated product role, or will there still be someone at the helm of this ship kind of saying, hey, here's what we're hearing people's needs are. And then they're just kind of orchestrating all of these
Yeah.
AI components, and maybe that becomes more of a single funnel versus today it does feel more like a conductor. Like I've got different
Hmm.
things I need to orchestrate. How should I be thinking about that?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly it. I think that it's more that each product builder will
Hmm.
become a little bit more like a product manager, and they will be orchestrating um, this kind of the team of builders, some of which will be AI, but they will be the ones empathizing with the users here, like kind of looking at the data and feeling why are we building this and how should we be solving this problem, and then using all of these AI tools to make it happen. So I think that if anything, it may be that kind of the design role is going to merge towards that,
Yeah.
the engineering role is going to merge towards that, and everyone's going to be kind of like a product manager. But more, I do think it's more of a product builder, because product manager today is managing a team of designers and engineers, and I don't think that that's exactly will happen in the future.
Yeah, no, I think that it is incredibly interesting. I think it'll be fun to be in that world because it lowers the barrier, right? To say, hey, anybody with a great idea can go build a product. I don't need design skills. I don't need engineering skills. And so we'll be able to see just hopefully so many new creative ideas come to life.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's a fun time to be alive and
Absolutely.
be a product builder.
Absolutely. Um, And, when you think about innovation, frankly, you're innovating all the time. It sounds like you're doing some pretty incredible things in terms of innovation. You still struggle with, hey, we've got these day-to-day things, and we're not in that world yet where we can go orchestrate the AI to
Yeah.
go fix all these bugs. So is there a framework or a mental model in terms of how you think about that balance of what do our customers need right now versus investing in the future or innovating towards the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely always think about kind of what, like, there's actually a lot of different startups where they're really just thinking about the future and not necessarily thinking about today's problems. And I think to some extent, VC funding kind of pushes you in that direction a little bit sometimes. Whereas I think we're very specific around what are today's problems that we should be solving, and we want to make sure that we solve all of those problems so that we are a complete solution. But I think that it's then how we solve them, and then how we always then also think about the kind of the future that we're building towards, so that it is when we're building something, we're building it in a way where it can be extended towards that future. And we're also leveraging large language models in a way where we're thinking about what are large language models going to be able to do in the future, so that we're not necessarily solving a problem that's going to be obsolete the moment we finish solving it, because the model has improved in a certain way that already solves that off the shelf, and we've just spent a ton of resources solving something on our own that doesn't necessarily help that. So I think those are kind of like the tactical prioritization that we do between short term and long term.
Yeah.
Um, and that comes from, I mean, partly from the space evolving and partly from the technology evolving. We kind of had to think about both.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that, like, sort of testing, like, is this future proofed, in 6 months from now, a year from now? I'm not sure if we can see much further than that. Um, but I'd love to hear maybe an example of, what's a case where as you're building an LLM, you're using an LLM to build, you're kind of walking that balance and saying, "Hey, I don't wanna overbuild, or I don't wanna build this in a way that's not guarded against sort of the changes that are happening underneath me, which are gonna probably be much faster than 6 months from now or a year from now."
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a lot of ways in which we built our product to take these models and make them behave in predictable ways, even though that's not what they do. But by nature, that's not what they do. And so oftentimes it involves splitting the analysis into lots of different steps, almost like kind of we think of it from the perspective as a product manager tasked with this task. What would be the steps if I had to like break down my task into multiple different steps? What would be the steps I would do to make sure that my end product is as precise as possible? So this is
Yeah.
kind of like just the building blocks of how we build this. And then every now and again we come across something that cannot be solved exactly in those steps that we've done. And so an example, a concrete example, is we fairly recently introduced projects, which is sort of our road mapping backbone. And we first rolled it out with a feature that took all of your insights and then analyzed it and put it into projects.
Hmm.
And that was sort of like the first stab of your road mapping essentially that you could obviously then reprioritize it into now next later, and you could also move things around and things like that, but just give you that first stab. And we built it, and then we're sort of like, this isn't good enough. This doesn't do a first, even though it's just the first stab at it, it's not a good enough first stab. We could build it into, like, if we changed how specifically we did the combination of steps, we'd probably arrive at something better. And that's what we considered. And then we were looking at the models and thinking that, okay, now there's these new reasoning models that are being introduced that are kind of doing some of that already under the hood. How about we wait for the reasoning models to catch up to this and be able to do some of this for us? And we don't actually, let's roll back the part that's analyzed, that takes your insights and puts them into projects. We just have projects be something where people can take the insights they want and put them into their own projects. And then we wait for the models to get better. And that's how we will get to something that's good enough. Because if we start rebuilding this AI architecture, by the time we're done building it, the models are going to be there. And that's just not a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, you're really highlighting the fact that like you have to be so steeped in how these models are evolving. And yeah, you now see that breakdown of like, hey, here's all the steps that I'm going to go through to answer this question that you've asked me, when you're in your kind of favorite tool of choice. And so to your point, like I love that you've really thought about, do we advance this forward or do we take a beat and wait until this becomes available? I also love the idea of the steps in the atomic units, right? Really breaking that up to make that a much more repeatable, because sometimes AI does feel like your really smart friend who occasionally lies.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Really, actually, those
invents things maybe. And so I love the chunking it apart though to make sure like it is precise and it is repeatable so that you're guaranteed to kind of get those good and consistent results.
Yeah, we've actually, as part of that, we've developed a proprietary hallucination detection mechanism that is
Oh,
part
wow.
of that multi-step process. That is what makes sure that it doesn't lie, it doesn't make things up, but it
It's you in
really
check.
is. Yeah.
No, that's great. And it's I'm sure something that is pervasively needed for sure. Um, you know, I think there's a lot of ways that obviously you're keeping your team informed about the customer needs. I love that you're dog fooding or maybe drinking your own champagne. Um, in terms of your own tool, what else? Because it sounds like, you are the experts in this arena. Like, how are you keeping your team best informed?
Yeah. So we definitely use Kraftful, as you mentioned, across everything. And so everyone has access to all the insights. And it's both so as one example, in Kraftful, we give you a list of feature requests or a list of complaints, and then you have how many times that each come up, and you can click through and see what exactly did users say, and so you have the full context, be that in like a call snippet or a support ticket. And when you then say, okay, this is a feature that is interesting to act on, click on it, and you say, turn this into a feature request, turn this into a user story. We write the user story with acceptance criteria, and then it syncs to linear. Now,
Mm.
when our engineers get that user story, they get a well-written user story, and you may have edited it or something that based on things that that isn't part of the body of feedback that was coming in. But they also get a link back to all of the instances where this feedback came up. So there's always this like ability to not just get my summarized version or the AI summarized version or the user story with acceptance criteria. The engineers can always explore around. And I think one interesting thing that we've noticed is just that it's both to give them the context and instantly show them the why they're working on something, but also be able to, whenever they have some sort of optionality that they've uncovered through implementation process, they can go and read more and oftentimes answer questions that they would have for the PM or the user researcher, just by having access to all the data. So that's one way. That just comes from kind of how our product is built. But then we do
Yeah.
some other things like our support channel is is connected to Slack. And so anyone can go in at any point whenever customers are writing into Kraftful through the chat on our site and respond to questions from end users. They can both respond to them. They can just read the thread if they want. If they weren't the first one to jump in and respond. But it really means that they can also just ask follow-up questions. I oftentimes try to jump in and respond whenever I see something that where I'm like, I want to. There's something here that I want to learn more about. And so if I just jump in really quickly while they're still online, I can essentially do a user interview with them there directly in Slack. And so that's another way where, and I usually try to kind of just quickly resolve their actual problem and then either try to ask them follow-up questions in Slack or ask them if they have time to just jump on a call and chat. But everyone on the team has access to that same ability. And if they spot something where it's like, oh, this is exactly what I'm working on right now, let me talk to an actual customer who's just reporting in about this very topic and learn more, right? It's sort of, it's very liberating to have that direct connection to customers.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think that's everybody's dream, right? Like, hey, I'm thinking about this thing, it's top of mind for me, and now I can actually interact with the person who's experiencing it.
Yeah.
I love too that like this traceability, this lineage that you're talking about really helps create autonomy because now everybody can know the things that matter. And I love that too of like when I'm thinking about that optionality, as you said, I'm best positioned to be able to answer that question myself. So I think that's sounds really powerful.
Yeah, our engineers really love that. It's
Yeah.
they're just so empowered, which is awesome.
Yeah. That's what you want. Um, I'd love to maybe switch gears a little bit and, talk about maybe another kind of common discussion topic amongst product leaders, which is, how's your team kind of organized? Are you remote, fully remote? Are you hybrid? Are you all in office? And, what are some of the best practices that are working for you based on, what work environment you all are following?
Yeah, so we're 100% remote. We are mostly based in California, so we're on mostly on the same time zone, but are completely remote. And I think what we've found is that remote really depends on the trust you have on the team. And so it's really, really important to build trust with team members to be able to then have like difficult conversations or know when you need to have a conversation versus when it's something that you can just write in Slack. And so I think a lot of it has been figuring out how we build that trust. We have in-person quarterly offsites, which we had one actually earlier this week here in San Francisco, but we've had them in different places. And so then we get together. It's mostly, sometimes we do kind of a very short strategy session, but mostly it's just bonding and talking and kind of learning about each other's families or whatever, right? So sort of kind of just like building that trust. One of our company values is empathy is our superpower, and we're really hired for that. Like people who can really empathize with each other, with customers, with users. That's really, really important. Then in terms of kind of more tactically, we really leaned on Slack to be almost like a room where you're chatting in writing, and then at any point in time, if you feel like a conversation would be better, either because it's a difficult conversation or it's complicated and you need to be able to kind of listen as much as talk, or it's you just miss people and you wanna have some face-to-face time even if it's on a screen, then we jump on a huddle and have a conversation with people. So it's not it's we try not to be too. I know some remote teams are very specific about everything needs to be in writing so that everything's documented for everyone to see at any point in time. And I think we draw the line slightly differently because we always think about the human connection. How do we build that
Yeah.
as much as possible and make it easy for people to have those like water cooler moments?
Yeah, I love that. Like, at the end of the day, we are humans, and so you have to have that relationship. I always think about it as like taking withdrawals from the bank, right? You got to put a big deposit back in. And so I
Yeah.
love that like your quarterly offsite sound like they're at that moment to make those deposits and then getting on the phone with somebody and making sure that everybody knows, hey, this is coming from a good place. I'm just trying to work through this with you as, another peer
Yeah.
helps to make those deposits of trust back into the bank.
Yeah. No, it's I think for just emotional connectedness.
Yeah. And when you mentioned the everything in writing though, and so I'm sure everybody can't help but think about, the 3-pagers or the 6-pagers. And
Mhm.
so, what when you think about writing things down, PRDs, that type of thing,
Mhm.
kind of what practices have you adopted that are working well to best suit this remote world?
Yeah. So we have PRDs happen in Kraftful for us, where we have
Mm,
a PRD writer, where you kind of pick the insights you want to include in your PRD, which can be some insights or no insights because it's something that you haven't gotten feedback on yet, and then you put in your topic that you want to write the PRD about. It writes the first draft, and then you can edit and invite team members. So that we have we have a solution for.
that sounds
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it's great, and it lives in the project, so you can kind of then you have everything else that sort of goes with that PRD. Um, then for other things that are kind of more on discussion points or more tangential things. For most part, it happens for us in Slack. I
Mm,
think in the past, before we had this like Kraftful and Slack setup, we
yeah.
also use a lot of docs, but we don't do that anymore. I think because we have a clear place for PRDs, and then we can talk about things in Slack. We have Slack connected to Linear too, so that if that doesn't have to we have Slack connected to Kraftful if we wanted to do it more from like be able to summarize discussions in specific Slack channels. But we also have it directly connected to Linear so that if we finish the discussion in Slack and we know what we're doing, and now we just want to turn this into a Linear ticket, we can do that as well. So there's a few different ways we do that and have that documentation happen. But it's usually using AI in one
Yeah.
shape or form.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds incredible. Um, Yeah, I think I've got time maybe for one last question for you, which is, you've talked already a lot about this, which is like, what does product management look like today?
Mhm.
How is that evolving? I guess I'm curious, is there anything else in terms of how you see that you'd want to share? And then would love to just like go through again, maybe one last time, like the stack that your product managers are using. I think you hit it up throughout our conversation
Mhm.
because I think what you all are doing sounds like where very much where things are headed more broadly. And then to your earlier point, it's just a question of time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we just kind of maybe start there in terms of the stack. We use a combination of obviously Kraftful for most things. That's sort of like the glue that holds it all together. We use Pylon for support tickets, which is kind of that. And I've never been inside of Pylon actually, because you can
You
do
get it in
everything.
Kraftful.
Yeah, exactly. So we have it connected to Kraftful. We have it connected to Slack. And so we that's one piece of that puzzle. We actually just use Google Meet for customer interviews because we then connect all of those call transcripts and get those analyzed directly in Kraftful. But you can use Zoom or you can use there's
Pick
really,
your
really,
favorite
really
tool.
anything. Um, and then we use Figma for design, which is sort of interestingly not connected to anything else.
Huh, yeah.
But hopefully will eventually be connected to other aspects of. Well, actually, that's not true. Figma is connected to Linear, so when we do have designs, they do automatically sync to Linear, and then we use Linear as our task management tool, and then we use GitHub on the other end of that for the software. So really, ultimately, I would say that's sort of 80% is Kraftful.
Yeah.
There's like all of these other things that sort of we have outside of that to fill certain gaps that I don't think we will ever go into those directions as a company. But yeah, it's a really solid stack for where we're at right now and what we're trying to do. And then in terms of what else is sort of what I also think from a product management perspective, I think that there's this, what I think is really exciting this is maybe a little bit more from a product builder than a product manager perspective, but I think of it as when we're all product builders and we have so much more resources to build what we want to build, leveraging AI. What I think is really exciting is our ability to solve more problems for more people, including minorities. And I say this particularly since it's not, we have a underserved minority, which is actually not a minority, just 50% of the population, that hasn't had necessarily products, like we women haven't had products built for us historically. And so there's so many different, when I think about sort of my friends, I've started a group called VC-backed Moms a few years ago, and it's now 500 VC-backed founders that are all building different companies. A lot of those companies serve women specifically, and that hasn't been true historically. There's just a lot of different stages in women's health that haven't been addressed, or, women's health, I would say, sort of like the biggest predominant one that I think of there. But I do think that when you don't need a whole lot of resources to build, AI helps. You don't necessarily need a whole lot of VC funding, so you don't need to go out and convince someone the same way before you start building your product and serving a sizable enough audience so that you can fund the product you're building. I just think that we're going to be working on so many more problems, which I think is really exciting. So I would say that's sort of like my view into the future is I think we're just going to have all of these unmet needs suddenly getting met, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, I was listening to something the other day that said somebody built a product and launched it again because of all these AI tools who wasn't an engineer, and they did it for like $300, right? It's wild to think like the barrier to entry goes to almost zero.
Mhm.
And so to your point, like now that opens up the world of possibilities of issues that we could solve that previously, like the economics didn't make sense, so nobody went and solved it.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that is really exciting. And again, it's like, I think it's the world that we all want to live in, is to say, hey, I can address all of these issues if I've got an idea, if I understand the user pain. And if AI can give us the tools to do that, that's fantastic.
Yeah. No, it's an exciting future.
Oh, well, you left me so energized today. I love your vision for the future. I plan to be there alongside you. That's the world I want to live into. So thank you so much for the time that you spent with us today and Products That Count.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
This is S.C. Moadi again, founder and chair of Products That Count. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, be sure to leave us a review on your favorite platform, including Spotify and Apple. And please check out our other resources at productsthatcount.org. They're designed to accelerate your product career and make product the most important function in business. Until soon.